One thing I wanted to highlight from this week's reading was thinking about the relationship between the ideology of a terrorist group and their goals and the kind of tactics that they use. This chart is a summary chart of some of what you had in the reading from the book that was published by the Defense Threat Reduction Center, the ICAR published book. And it summarizes kind of the relationship or what typical goals might be, what audiences organizations are talking to, and the types of targets and tactics that different kinds of groups will use. What I think is really important about this is that it actually can help with thinking through some kind of prediction or helping us to understand. So, religious and extremist religious groups tend to use pretty indiscriminate violence because they have understand themselves as being sanctioned by God. And that's quite different than how an ethnic separatist group acts, who are much more concerned about the impact they might have on a government or on a political group or on members of their own ethnicity. And so they tend to be more specific and discriminate. As you're thinking through some of the different groups that we're going to talk about over the rest of the semester, just think about what logically makes sense for a group to do depending on what their goals are and what audiences are they trying to reach. Is their audience a local population? Is it a state? Is it an international audience? Is it some combination of all of those? Are they primarily using violence to impact members of another group? So just kind of thinking about some of those questions. The other thing I wanted to highlight was that there are quite a few different definitions of terrorism. So the one on the very top here is one that is the one used by the US FBI, State Department, others, because it's written in US code. And you'll notice that it's really focused on the actual violence, right? And thinking about subnational groups and clandestine agents. So it doesn't account for state-sponsored terrorism, particularly. It doesn't really account for really domestic terrorism all that well, though we do see that we have this kind of international and domestic definition later on. The second definition on here is one from the UN, and it's much more focused on the intention or what the group is trying to do as opposed to just the actions themselves. You saw in the reading this week a variety of other definitions that we can use to think about terrorism, including some quite complicated academic ones. Keep in mind that people are defining it because they're intending to do something about it. So if you're defining it because you're law enforcement, you're going to have a definition that focused on laws and that you could actually try someone with. If you're defining it as an intelligence agency, you might have kind of a different definition to that. You're more interested in political impact. But either way, those definitions are important, and who's defining clearly matters because they're putting someone in a different category.